Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pod Life. We are doing episode 2 of the Gummy Horrors, and back for another visit is Christopher Lawrence. Christopher, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Christopher has had an exciting event happen since the last time we were together, and we're very proud. Christopher got married.
I did!
Yay!
Yay! I'm sorry I'm off the market.
Hey, he's off the market. Sorry, everybody.
Yes,
He's
actually,
taken.
I'm not sorry. I'm happy to be off the market. I'm sorry for all of you, though.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
All of you people
all
out
of
there.
you that were clearly knocking down my door.
There you go. So, we're going to pick up where we left off from the last time. So, when we ended last session, we were talking about self-control. So, I'm just going to go right into the next question that I have.
Yeah.
Can you, in your own way, define the difference between diet versus lifestyle?
So here's how I see it. Diet is something that you do for a definitive amount of time.
Okay.
So, and I guess it depends on the context of the word. So here I'm going to get a little bit chatty, but I see it as, in the context that we're talking, it's for a definitive amount of time. Whereas a lifestyle is like, I don't really question, this is what I do, right? This is the way I eat for the rest of my life. The other context of diet is just in its simplest form, right? Which is, this is my diet. These are my food choices, not as in diet losing weight, but as in, this is my diet, as in my food choices. So I don't know if that makes sense, but...
It does, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it's more about having that, it's more about making a lifestyle choice.
Okay, now my next question. Lifestyle and diet changes over the past half a century compared to what they're like today.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'll do my best with this.
Okay.
About just over 40 years ago, there was a guy named Ansel Keys, and he was funded by an organization called the Sugar Research Foundation, or it might have been the Sugar Research Council, I think is what it was. And he did a study that was basically saying sugar is not unhealthy for you. In fact, it might be healthy for you. And so he studied, I don't know, many countries. I think it was over 40, maybe 30. And his criteria was that fat makes you fat. And therefore, there's no problem with sugar. And so what he published was findings on only 7 countries that he felt met his criteria. But it was bad science.
Holy.
It was bad science. So from that, we got 40 years of low fat, reduce your fat, low fat products in grocery stores. And so then what did we do? We increased our carbohydrate consumption. Also, what happens with the flavor of food when you take fat out of it?
There's nothing left.
There's no flavor.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So what did we do to compensate for flavor?
Yay, sugar!
We added sugar, right? So now it's coming to light with good science and good research that fat, in fact, is required for the body, and the USDA, I believe it was, U.S. Department of Agriculture. They every 5 years they do a study where they take multiple studies on food and food consumption, like anything and everything you can imagine, and they look at all the studies that have happened in the last 5 years, and they compare, and even beyond, and they compare them to each other, and they say what is the best science and what are the most common themes. And just last year, it was either last year or the year before, the USDA removed the upper limit on fat completely. So the 3 previous studies or previous years, I can't remember which it was, they had basically And you can find this report. It's actually not that hard to find. I'd have to tell you the Google, but it's a over 500 page report where they've gone and done all this research. And basically what they've done is they've said, and they only look at peer reviewed journals by credible sources. They look at the funding. So who's funded this? Was it funded by pharmaceuticals? Was it funded by food manufacturers? Or was this a third party sort of independent study? So they look at all of this stuff. And so they've been increasing the percentage of daily fat intake over the last 3 or 4 years. And then last year they came out and said there is no upper limit. There's no maximum amount of fat that you can eat that we would consider unhealthful. And they do not differentiate between saturated and non-saturated fats. Basically what they're saying is the impact is so minimal compared to everything else that's happening in our bodies because of sugar and inflammation, that you should just start consuming fat, period.
Wow.
That's what they've said. So here's a really interesting fact that you can take back, or that your listeners can take with them. So hang on, I lost my thought. That's okay. It'll come back to me, I promise. It always comes back. I just need to give it a minute. But there's a really interesting fact in there, and I can't remember what it was now. So you have to keep listening.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned
for more on fat. Okay, that is really
basically
interesting.
they removed the upper limit on fat, and they're not different. Oh, it was about heart disease. That's what it was. Okay. So here's what we say: high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease. Means that we need to reduce cholesterol, i.e. lower your fat consumption. They are not finding a credible correlation between, I shouldn't say zero, but basically they're not finding a correlation, a direct correlation between the consumption of fat and cardiovascular disease.
Wow. And
they found the same with salt. So yes, salt in excess, certainly, but actually salt is not your enemy either. It's okay. Salt is not as concerning as sugar is, not even by a long shot. If you can get your high glycemic carbs down, that is how you will prevent inflammation, how you will prevent heart disease or other types of inflammation. It's not just heart disease.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is crazy. So 40 years of bad science, right?
Yeah.
And science builds off science, right?
Yes.
So you get one study and it's like, oh, here's new. So all other science after that has to reference the original study.
Yeah.
Right? Until somebody can prove otherwise. And now they've taken the time and they're like, actually, this doesn't make sense.
Wow.
So, and then exercise, I think when you talk about, the last sort of half century of exercise as it relates to weight loss, there is zero or virtually zero correlation between exercise and weight loss.
Really?
Really. So we kill ourselves at the gym. Exercise is still good. It's incredible. It's required. It's required for two things: range of motion, right? And strength. Those are the things that we lose. So we want to keep our range of motion. So things like yoga, swimming, something that uses your whole body, right? I do obstacle course racing, and strength, right? I do obstacle course racing because I get a bit of both. I have to use my body in different ways, and I require strength. So that one gets both for me.
Right.
Right? But those are the two things that you need to exercise for. Exercise is good. Even just simple walking. I think sometimes people go way out of their way to kill themselves. I have a personal rule, by the way. I do not work out unless it's fun. If I'm not having fun, I don't do it anymore.
Yeah. That's a good rule.
Yeah, why not? Any exercise is better than nothing. So
true.
I do things that are fun for me.
And I'm a freak of walking. I have to get my steps every day.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes, right? The one thing we say about exercise a lot is consistency will trump time and intensity every time. So what I mean by that is when you look at the longevity of your life, 10 minutes of deliberate active walking, sort of getting your arms moving, walking every day is better than, say, 2 or 3 times at the gym of intense workouts every 6 weeks, and then you stop for 8, and then, right?
Yeah.
Consistency trumps time and intensity any day in terms of longevity of life or anti-aging.
There's a happy thought for everybody who hates working out.
Yeah, that's right. Totally. Exactly.
Okay, so next question. In today's society, how do you maintain a healthy lifestyle?
Broaden your question, or narrow your question down a little bit. I think what I'm hearing in there is that there's an implication that it's difficult to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, it is. With all of the, pretty pictures, fancy ads, flashing this, flashing that, everything at your fingertips.
Yeah, totally, right? Culturally, we're really not set up for it. I think it comes back to habits and planning, right? Having a habit of planning. And I know this sounds really strange, but, willpower doesn't last a long time. And so we use a lot of education to reinforce, because you want to reinforce the knowledge. So that's the first thing. If you don't know, then you need to know. Okay. The second thing is don't rely on willpower, because it doesn't last very long.
It's true.
Especially when we get closer to the end of the day. So by the time you get to the end of the day, you've used up your sort of decision-making power. So it's no surprise that people. It's no surprise that people. We have a visitor here.
At Woofington's Post is joining us.
At Woofington's Post is here in the studio.
He's live.
And he is dying to get out.
He's live. He's here.
There he is. Hello. Mr. Woofington himself.
There you go.
Yeah, and lots of kisses. Hi, handsome Dan. So, what were we saying? I just want to focus on the dog now.
We are talking about willpower, end of the day.
So I think one of the biggest things, so education is a key piece. I think, and then the second piece is awareness, right? So being aware of your habits. What do you currently do? Almost to the minutia. Like I know when I walk in the house at the end of the day, I know for a fact if I do not have a meal prepared when I walk in that door, or if I cannot prepare something within 5 minutes or less, I'm gonna go to consume something. So for me, it's no longer junk, but I might eat a whole bunch of nuts or something when really all I need is the meal itself. Right? So I do a couple things to plan, and this would be the third thing, is pre-planning. So I do my planning when I'm in my optimal state, which is usually in the morning, usually at the beginning of the week. And you'll notice this, I'm not the only one. Usually by the end of the day, we start to be a little more forgiving with our choices. By the end of the week, Friday comes and it's like, oh, I'm just going to eat whatever I want, right? And so what I say is plan it, right? And do that when you're in your optimal state. So early in the day and at the beginning of the week, as best as you can. So in the morning, I will sit down and I'll think, if I haven't planned at the beginning of the week, I'll say, okay, I know I'm getting close to the end of the week, or I'm getting tired or whatever. So then I'll say, okay, what I need is to know exactly what I'm going to eat tonight. So what's in my fridge right now that I can put together in 5 or 10 minutes or less? Right? And if I see, it's going to be a busy week, I'll do cooking in advance, so I don't have to think about it. I can just throw it in a pan or microwave if you have a microwave, and heat it up, and then you don't have to make a choice. The decision was already made. So it sounds kind of boring and like unmotivating and uninspiring, but the truth is it's really empowering when you get to the end of the week and you say, wow, that worked. And that's when the motivation sort of hits you again. You're like, wow, it's like I made good choices this week.
Awesome. I don't do that. I don't
do the pre-planning.
I don't make
good choices.
I don't make.
I'm sure you make some good choices in your life.
At Woofington's Post, I did. Okay, this is a personal question. What are your top 5 evil foods?
Zesty cheese Doritos right out of the gate. Not even nacho cheese. Zesty cheese Doritos. They're fluorescent orange. There is not a color in nature that is represented by the color of this chip. And when I consume those, although it's been a long time, last time I did, I actually got sick to my stomach, like literally, like I think I ate too many. I'll go to like Costco and get the family size bag, and I'll just eat as many as I can until I'm sick of them. Usually a day and a half and I'm done. Like the bag is done.
Yeah.
Chips and so zesty cheese Doritos is number 1. Chips is number 2.
Yeah.
And then probably chocolate.
Okay.
Is number 3. So some people are savory or sweet. I like to balance it out. Oh, I've had a lot of savory. I should top this off with a chocolate bar or 3. And then we're probably getting it. So those 3. And then we're probably now getting into more like the sort of carb heavy takeout meals. So pizza is probably 1. And then Chinese food would be the other.
Yes.
Which are, pizza's high glycemic, but Chinese food is basically everything coated in sugar.
It's true.
I shouldn't always say that. There's options, right? Like they do have like stir-fried vegetables and stuff where they don't put sugar in and that kind of thing. Although it depends where you go. It depends where you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to paint the entire Chinese food industry with one brush. Right? That's not. There are some very healthy. There are some, because there are places out there that are becoming very conscious, saying, "Look, this is what the majority wants, but we want to cater to people who want."
That's true.
This Asian style food, but who have sort of conscious eating.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true. Do you feel there is a benefit to food journaling?
Yes, hugely. But actually, I want to go back.
Okay.
What are your top 5?
Oh, Lord. Darn it.
Is it gummies?
Okay, depending on the day.
Yes.
So it would be gummies.
Yeah.
Licorice.
Okay.
Chocolate.
Yeah.
Chocolate-covered jujubes.
And... You can't eat them. You can't just have, like, chocolate with a jujube at the same time in your mouth.
No.
It has to be chocolate covered jujubes. I agree. It's a different food category.
Totally.
Yeah.
Has to be cold from the fridge.
Yes.
And then I guess chips would be my 5th one.
Chips, hey?
Yeah.
You really like the sweet stuff, eh?
Oh yeah. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
So, see, just talking about it, it's like,
I'm thinking about it now. And then also remember, like, it's destroying your body and will give you early onset dementia. And
I try to, you know what, I've been trying to put it that way.
Yeah.
So that I don't stock up and have the chocolate bars in the freezer and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I know it's bad.
Yes, totally. And finding other things that are maybe sweet but more healthful.
Cherries at this time of year.
Yes, and actually you can get bags of frozen cherries, eh?
Can you?
Yeah, you can. You can get, I think we get ours from Costco, and I like them because I'll pop one in my mouth and it's almost like when they've thawed just a tiny little bit, and the ice on it, because they have like moisture. Some of the moisture starts to flake off, and when I put it in my mouth, it's almost like having the texture of candy coated. With like icing sugar or something. Like it's
interesting.
Pretty, I mean, cherries would still be higher glycemic, but it is certainly better than a jujube or a chocolate bar, right? And if you throw in a couple of nuts with it, then you're balancing it out a bit.
Oh yeah, see, there I go. I can throw some chocolate covered peanuts in.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, not chocolate covered peanuts. No, hang on. And peanuts are not a nut. They're a legume.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're bad for you, aren't they?
Peanuts are funny because they're not a nut. It's a legume. But when you look at your fat, peanuts go there, and I can't explain this well, but I know that there's sort of 2 streams that fat go down, and peanuts go down the bad one.
Interesting.
So,
What about pistachios? I don't ever see pistachios on lists of...
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I eat pistachios.
I love them.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, and cashews too. I like cashews.
Yeah, I do
the
too.
sweeter nuts, right?
Of course.
And then Brazil nuts. I eat them, but I don't particularly enjoy them.
Those are what I'll go for when it's, the chip craving. If I have to, then you go for the
the salted.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, back to...
Yes,
This is really good. Back to the food journaling.
Right. Yeah, so here's what I think is helpful. I think food journaling is helpful for some people. I think some people maybe where there's like sort of a pre-existing history of food tracking, maybe due to like anorexia or bulimia and that kind of thing. Sometimes food journaling can exasperate or reintroduce that history. Not for everybody, but for some people, right? So I would say if you have a history of that, you're certainly going to check with somebody. Outside of that, I think food journaling is an incredible incredible idea. From the perspective that, one, it brings awareness. Two, when you plan and then you track how you're doing on that plan. So I'm going to eat this today. And then you go back and you say, here's how I did, right? And food journaling can be as simple as, I had my 2 meals and my 3 snacks, or my, however you choose to consume food throughout your day. Food journaling, I think, can be very beneficial, but we also know that there's something to the tracking piece that seems to sort of evoke this internal accountability. And I think sometimes you have to refresh it. And I know it sounds funny, it can be really big and it can be really simple, but you might just be like, oh, I'm on like a 2-week kick of increasing my greens, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of challenges if they don't, like what are you doing it for? But if it's to sort of refresh, right? As simple as it sounds, sometimes for when I go through my food journaling phases, and I go off and on with them, but when I go through mine, sometimes new stationery makes all the difference, because I'm motivated to use the stationery.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I like different colors and different pens and stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everybody, and maybe it seems cheesy, but listen, I'm all about, if I can actually fake myself to doing it because I already have a habit of new fancy fun stationery. If I can, the utilization of that is by tracking food, then I'm actually creating a food habit based off of a stationary, a new stationary habit. So I'm kind of trying to fake myself into creating something new. I find it very helpful. I love new stationery.
I do too.
Yeah.
To keep me out of Staples.
Yeah. I know. Staples is almost boring to me now.
Well,
I've seen so much of it.
Yeah.
I want
something new.
I know, totally. We need a more funky. Reed's stationery used to be like that.
Yes.
But they've kind of gone downhill since then.
Yeah.
Or maybe you should edit that.
That's okay.
Or don't. That's my personal opinion. Reed's stationery. You need to stay away from the stupid cheesy jokes. You're starting to look like San Francisco. You remember that store from the 80s and 90s? You need to put that aside.
Yeah. Let's go back to stationery.
Go back to awesome stationery.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Now you mentioned the word habit, and this isn't in my list of questions, but now I have to ask it because I have another podcast series called 2 Bitches on a Bench, and there was
I've heard part of it actually. I love it.
There was one session we were talking about habits, and the question came up, isn't everything a habit?
Yes.
Isn't everything a habit?
Everything is a habit.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything or nearly everything is a habit. The way you walk, the way you talk, how you eat, what you choose to eat, how you drive, even the way you think is all habitual.
And so you can break a habit?
No. You cannot break a habit. No. So here's what we understand. There's a great book, and I might have mentioned this last time. It's called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Okay, it's totally worth a read. He's also got one called Smarter, Better, Faster, I think that was by him, and so that's what are these elite athletes doing and that kind of thing, and elite corporations and this kind of thing, but The Power of Habit is worth everybody reading. So you cannot change a habit, however, because once that neuroplasticity is in there, once that neural pathway is in there, it is the way it is. However, you can change what you do with it. So can I give you sort of the anatomy of a habit
please.
as according to Charles Duhigg? So let's give credit where credit is due, is Charles Duhigg stuff. So here's what we have. Think of it as a loop, and in this loop you have cue, which is the trigger. This is the thing. So for me, it's I see the bag of zesty cheese Doritos. Sometimes just seeing it is enough of a trigger, right? Sometimes it's stress. Sometimes it's a time of day. Sometimes I'm craving, social interaction, right? And so that's the cue, right? Okay. Could be an emotion, right? It doesn't matter. Any kind of cue, smell, sight, touch, taste, right? Or emotion, a feeling, right? Where you are, who you're with can be a cue, right? You hear about this all the time with people who are it's I don't smoke unless I'm drinking, right? You hear that and it's well, then drinking is the cue. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Or it's I don't drink unless I'm with these people. Those people are the cue, right? So you have a trigger. the trigger leads to the behavior. So you come down the circle a little bit, it leads to the routine, right? So it's cue, routine, reward. Cue is first, routine is second in the loop, and routine is the behavior, the action that you take. So with the Zesty Cheese Doritos, I grab the bag, I take it to the counter, I pay for it, and I usually open it as soon as I get in my car.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I have the first chip, and then the payoff. So that's the last thing in the loop. So you have the payoff or the reward, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
cue, routine, reward, according to Charles Duhigg's words, right? And the reward is the payoff. It's the thing you get from doing this behavior. So I eat the chip and I feel better, right? Somehow. And if that reaction is strong enough, it goes back to the cue. So what that means is that because I had that sensation with it, the second that I see those chips again or I get stressed again, I'm going to know that I can get that payoff.
Right.
So the stronger the reward, the more likely the cue is to lock in.
Right.
Where the craving comes in is between the reward and the cue. That's where cravings start.
Okay.
So if the reward is strong enough, you form a craving and that loops back to the cue. Right. So here's the thing. The cue is pretty much in there for life. Okay. So when I see Zesty Cheese Doritos, there will always be an instant. In time, I may not even notice it. Just like driving. I don't really notice how I drive. I'm just driving, right? Like most people on earth, unless you're a brand new driver, or maybe you've been in a car accident or a near miss. Then all of a sudden you become aware of your driving again.
Right.
There's a clue to that in terms of how do we change a habit, okay?
Okay.
So I'll come back to that example. So that will always happen, but the cue will never change. If what I'm looking for when I go to get Zesty Cheese Doritos is relaxation, or maybe I'm looking for a sensation, or maybe I'm looking for a break, or I'm looking for socialization, because we use food for weird things, right? That will never change either. I still need that payoff.
Okay.
So for me to go for a run instead of eating Zesty Cheese Doritos probably won't do it, because a run, if what I'm looking for is relaxation, a run isn't going to do it.
Right.
And this is what people think is they should do. It's like, oh, I'll just do this instead. You should replace the behavior, the routine part. That's the piece you can change.
Okay.
But what you change it with has to give you the same reward that eating the chip did.
Interesting.
Okay, so that's the piece you can change, is the behavior piece.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So like here's ways that we can put in interventions, like the driving. If you're a new driver, it's not a habit. You're aware of everything that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But if you're let's say you're a seasoned driver, but you get into an accident or you have a near miss, doesn't it make you more aware of what you're doing?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I'm going to increase my following distance. I'm going to be really careful about the people around me. I'm not driving for myself anymore. I'm driving for all of them. And it snaps you back to reality.
Yeah.
That's what we can do with these things. So sometimes we do it in a gentle approach where we take a phased approach, or sometimes we do something really extreme. Like the next time you go to buy chocolate-covered jubes, you might stand at the till and say, I'm about to pay for chocolate-covered jubes, really loud, right? And I'm saying it out loud to embarrass myself, because the pain of doing this every single time is going to make me not want to do it. So I apologize for the interruption. How often are you going to want to buy chocolate-covered jubes if that's what you have to do?
Never.
Probably never.
Yeah.
So if you could even make a deal with somebody that that's what you're going to do, and they're going to hold you accountable, and it probably has to be for a long time, like a year, maybe more, right?
Yeah.
And you make that deal with somebody where it's like, and it requires honesty. I mean, if you're going to lie to them, you're lying to yourself, and there's no point. You have to know, right? But you can make that deal with somebody, and I wouldn't make it with family or your best friend.
Right.
You got to make it with somebody where it's going to feel like, if I lie to them or don't tell them, it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting, you probably wouldn't do it again, right? Or you do something like you cut a check to somebody who you want to be accountable to. Like for you, what would be the dollar value that would be reasonable, right? That would be worth for you to not eat jubes anymore. These are just tactics. We're talking tactics now.
Probably, $200.
Okay, so let's say 1,000 then.
Yeah.
right?
Yikes.
We're talking about your health, right?
Yeah.
And you've probably spent more than $1,000 on crap food, and maybe you've spent more than $1,000 on health related stuff in your life that maybe if you didn't eat the junk, you wouldn't have needed to do in the first place. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and not because you're you, but because you're human in North America, and this is what we do.
Me. No.
Yeah, totally. I know a little bit. Okay, so if you were to cut a check, and you were to sign it, and we were to make it out to a charity like the KKK,
Oh.
and you were to give that check to somebody to hold for you, right?
Yeah.
In a safe, somewhere safe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe even a safety deposit box. And you had to be accountable to them, to not even yelling in the grocery store, but just to not buying chocolate covered jujubes.
Yeah.
But you knew that it, and maybe there's even people around you that are going to report it if they know.
Yeah.
And you set yourself up for failure, or for success, where it's like your boss, your coworkers, you've told them all, I've done this, I've given a $10,000 check to the KKK, which is sitting in a safe. And your job is to call this person should you see me with any of these, and I need to self-report. And then, if it happens, that person sends the check in.
Yikes.
You get a tax receipt.
Embarrassing tax receipts.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's the point. It's so painful for you to do that now that you'll probably never do it again in your life.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you need to do it long enough that you establish the habit.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That you establish a habit. So probably not 6 weeks, because we know you could do 6 weeks. Right?
Yeah.
Probably closer to a year. Maybe 2.
Or 2.
Maybe 5.
Maybe 5.
Right? And then you get your check back.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. Yikes.
Yeah.
Maybe I better do that.
Yeah, maybe, right?
Yeah.
You know, you got to get serious if you really want to change it. Now, that's an extreme example, but how extreme is it that, this, whole sugar addiction thing, right? This whole, addiction, whatever we want to call that. How extreme is that? And how badly do you want to change?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing that we know about people. If they want to change, they will find a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes, not always, sometimes pain is the, an immediate pain is the, one of the best ways of motivating ourselves.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then a big reward maybe at the end too.
I might have to think about that one.
Mhm.
That's interesting. My next question was about physical activity, but you actually already answered that.
Perfect.
So, great. Next question is, we're getting into ketogenic now.
Yeah.
What does the ketogenic model mean to you?
So here's and I want to be really careful because this has become a fad now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad that it's become known in society, okay? Let me first say that. Let me also say there is an incredible amount of social media and media extremism for ketogenic diets, where people are consuming way too much, period, right? So let me tell you what I understand it to mean, and I would call it keto light or moderate keto. And if you eat this way, you will reduce inflammation, and if you have weight to lose, you're going to lose weight, okay? So the way I understand it is that you reduce the consumption of carbohydrates. However, so what I'm talking about there is, so in layman's terms, it's about putting your body in ketosis, and you can test this with ketone strips. You can get them from any drugstore, and you can see if you're in ketosis, okay? You don't want too much though, right? If the strip turns dark purple or black or whatever, you're losing it too fast, right? So you kind of want it to be in the middle. But the idea behind this is that you have a higher fat consumption, moderate protein consumption, and then low carbohydrate consumption. Okay. So when I say low carbohydrate consumption, I'm not talking like Atkins. Atkins was onto something. He was high protein, right, and low carb. Yeah. But people and again, it was executed very poorly. People walked around thinking that they could consume bacon for a meal. That's not what we're talking about here, right? And even with bacons, you got to be careful because the second you get like a maple flavored or this flavored, there's probably sugar in it, right? Most bacon actually has sugar. Go look at the ingredients.
Like, well, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it does. Most does, even if it's not maple flavored. It's amazing.
Well, that's how they cure it, right?
Yeah, totally. So sometimes in the curing, it's like, okay, let's be real here. How much sugar is actually in it? You know, by the time, because there's a lot of fat. So that's the idea. Is that you want to have more fat, moderate protein, low carb. Protein does still provide a glycemic reaction. Okay, so what we're trying to do is keep your blood sugar levels or your insulin levels as even as possible. Okay. We do not have to resort to extremism. Okay, so this would be like having a palm-sized piece of protein on your plate.
Okay.
Right, and lots of greens. So even though greens are like when I say reducing carbohydrates, what I'm really talking about is reducing high glycemic carbohydrates.
Right.
Most people will never eat as much greens or vegetables as they need to in their diets, right? So, you know, we have I run a program, as you know, we focus on 160 grams of leafy greens, right? High quality leafy greens, so not iceberg, but things like, you know, spinach or other mixed greens, right? And go and measure 160 grams of leafy greens and then add 5 to 7 servings, right? So about a cup worth of other vegetables, not potatoes, not carrots, but things like broccoli or cauliflower, right? Things like that, because potatoes are starch and so high glycemic, and carrots are pretty close to being classified as one. They're doing a lot of work with carrots right now. So you want to focus on, you know, cucumbers, things like that. You want to put those things in, and look at how big your bowl is.
Yeah.
And that's how many you need to eat every day. So even though it's quote unquote low carbohydrate, most people are actually still, if they do a ketogenic diet properly, they're actually consuming more, in terms of chewing, more carbohydrates than they did before.
Wow.
In terms of chewing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because greens don't weigh very much. Most people we find have a hard time even consuming that amount of greens and vegetables, right? It is a lot, right?
Yeah.
But we know that people who have primarily plant-based diets, so this doesn't necessarily mean vegetarianism or veganism, but people who have primarily plant-based diets actually have longer lives and have more healthful lives and less inflammation. So we're talking low glycemic though, right? So even fruit and vegetable and stuff, it's like, oh, you should have 6 to 7 servings of fruit a day. You know, it's like, well, not if you're eating keto. Fruit is still a good choice, right? Because there's nutritional value. But if you want to go keto, fruit, anything that's high starch, high glycemic, will pull you out of ketosis, right? So you even want to limit the amount of fruit that you're having, right? It's not bad for you, and you can get everything you need from vegetables anyway. Right? So high vegetables, which are low glycemic vegetables. Did you know, by the way, white bread has a glycemic index of 100, and a russet potato has a glycemic index of 120 or 150?
What?
Yeah, so some potatoes are worse than white bread for you.
Wow.
I know, yeah. In terms of glycemic index, potatoes still have some nutritional value, but if you can get it in other places, you don't require the potato. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that is. It's like, oh, really?
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Hopefully effectively.
You did. Yes, you did. So just before we have to wind this up, because you were kind of leading into it, can you talk to us a little bit about your program?
Yeah, sure, yeah. So the program that I run it with Dr. Mike Breen. He's got over 30 years of nutritional experience. He is a doctor of chiropractic medicine, and what people mistake is that chiropractic is just about spine and spine health. It's actually about the whole body and the functionality of the body. And so they get a lot of nutritional stuff. And so Mike's been doing this for a long time. And so Mike focuses on the on the food science, and I focus on the behavioral science. Our program is 12 months long, which people think is absolutely nuts to have it at 12 months. But reason why it's 12 months is because we know that we can get people to lose weight. It doesn't matter if you use Weight Watchers or Dr. Bernstein's, it does not matter. Okay? Anybody can lose weight. That we know. What doesn't happen though is that they keep it off. And if you look at the scientific research, it's close to like 95 to 98% of people who lose weight will put it back on. That's in clinical studies. In real life, it's probably like 70 or 80% of the people who lose weight will put it back on. So our program is 12 months long so that we can continue to focus on habits and habit change, right? There are some people, because it's a lifelong thing, right? There are some people who want more, and actually our very first group said that they wanted additional support. So we do have a follow-up program if people want access to that as well. But the first step is really getting in there. We meet twice a month for an entire year for 90 minutes.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, it's a big commitment. But you know, your health is a big commitment, and if you want to change, why not change permanently? You know, we usually get people who are at the end of their journey too, people who have tried 2 or 3 or 4 things. We very rarely get people who come in and say, this is my first time losing weight, you know, trying to lose weight. Usually they've tried multiple times, multiple programs, different things, and they just can't sustain it. And so what we focus on is correct eating and then establishing behaviors that lock that in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. And thank you for joining me for a second podcast.
Thank you.
It was exciting.
Yes.
And I'd love to have you back again. Maybe we can talk about another subject. I've got some ideas in my head.
I would love to.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And thanks, listeners.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners.